So let's start with your first question about the advances made in recent years in the field of technology, especially AI, and how would I characterize the present, or what diagnosis would I make? So as far as AI, artificial intelligence, is concerned, I would want to start by saying that AI has had so many rounds. So we need both to understand the current interest in AI in relation to earlier historical layers of what it meant, but also to recognize what might be new, especially in relation to technological capacities of, for instance, large language models or generative AI, as part of this specific current ecosystem of platform capitalism. So here the question of these histories is not just about AI, but it's about histories, or perhaps even media archaeologies, of specific modes and models of automation, for example, or even automatisms featured in language or experiments with language, as we know from 20th century avant-garde, for instance. Mostly I've been, though, working on the question of technical images in this respect. I just published a book called Operational Images, where I also deal with some aspects of visual culture in the age of AI, machine learning. Here the issue is how visuality is being framed beyond traditional notions of visibility, visuality, aesthetics, and replaced into, literally replaced into questions of infrastructure, labor, training sets, data sets, broadly speaking, data culture. This marks a specific period that is not merely about invisibility anymore. This key trope of scientific visualization for a long time, of visualizing the invisible. This was used a lot in data visualization context as well. I think it's not accurate. Or visualizing in earlier times, visualizing, for example, the micro scale. Now there is something else at play that triggers a particular question about data, both pre-digital data and digital data. And the book Operational Images is one response to this question, and also perhaps your question as well. With my Prague colleague Tomáš Tovozák, who is also part of our 5-year project on operational images and visual culture that the Czech Science Foundation funded, we just wrote a short piece on generative AI in this spirit as well. We tried to lay out some key points about recent discussions. Is the entry of generative AI as radical as photography was in 19th century? How much of the discourse relies on old-fashioned notions of creativity and art, and how much of this relates to the already de facto automated content industries? However, images and content are not the same. So the question of the image in its materiality, in its political aesthetics, in its digital aesthetics remains to be asked. So how does this impact or redefine conceptions of the human and its relationship to the non-human? Like many others, I'm interested in questions of automation, of machines that speak to other machines instead of humans, and how AI is and should be irreducible to human capacities, or read in relation to particular humanistic discourse about design. This applies to technology in general. Despite the claims of returning to more human values, I think it's not exactly correct. I'm also someone who came to think of language as nothing inherently human in the narrow sense in the first place. He was already halfway through to a particular post-human agenda. This is, of course, the backbone of several different theories of critical post-humanities as well. But as far as AI and computational capacities are concerned, the mass-scale capacity to produce this peculiar thing called culture through computational processes is here the intriguing part, especially as we have moved to an increased use of synthetic data in training those machines. But to note here is that culture wasn't culture in the first place synthetic already. Wasn't culture already, whatever culture means, a machine of synthesis in the first place, and whole line of artificiality in relation to AI data sets needs to be rethought. The question actually is, what are our concepts of synthesis in this case? We could go back to really interesting philosophical discussions again, addressing this through Simondon or Deleuze and Guattari, for example. Besides synthesis, another theme is scale. I'm with Benjamin Bratton on this one. That scales of AI do not return to the figure of the human, but by necessity need to involve perceptual and cognitive capacities that have a different task to do. AI at the scale of cities, of planetary processes, of technological, or biogeochemical metabolisms, AI that is relevant to a particular animal perception. This was a pet topic of mine for a while, especially when writing insect media, but also when doing work on software and things like computer viruses. All these relate to histories of artificial life, but also to the other scales of impact of computation, both materially and conceptually. Thirdly, you're asking what are the main challenges that this situation poses for thinking about democracy? I can cite the usual list of all sorts of automated operations, both directly or indirectly, about military, security, and psyops. But note that the risk is not just technological, obviously. It is more that particular technological capacities cater to a range of also regressive political projects that are around with quite the intensity. Ethno-nationalisms, dictatorial regimes, right-wing hate campaigns, petro-fossil fuel industry lobbyists. So it's basically fascists and capitalism that are the danger to democracy. What is of course frightening is how some of these people in charge of large technological platforms, such as Elon Musk's Twitter, they're leaning very heavily in some cases to very dubious right-wing political directions. Yet as we know, capitalism is not reducible to these rotten apples at the top, but it's a system of exploitation down to the core. We need thus to be able to really develop progressive political technological projects that take fully advantage of the multitude of technological possibilities of platforms, data, AI, but also reinvention of energy infrastructures, of course, as part of not just reacting to the ills of technological culture, but designing actual capacities. This is a certain kind of politics of joy, to echo Spinoza, in the age of fascists popping up everywhere, and where we cannot just respond to their talking points and to be reactive, but look at the broader ecological and political stakes of what can we build instead.